Hello, welcome to my channel, True Crime with KT. If you like what you see in here today, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you are a returning subscriber, I'm very much appreciative of you. I'm going to be talking about a couple of cases today, mostly two cases, but they have something in common, and that would be Fort Hood, which is in Guillen, Texas. And excuse me if I pronounce that incorrectly. I want to start with Vanessa Guillen, who joined the Army in 2018 as a small arms repair person. On April the 22nd, 2020, when she was 20 years old, she was called into work on her day off. And from what they have later discovered, she was bludgeoned to death with a hammer and then was considered missing. That's a photo of Vanessa that you'll be looking at here. On June the 30th, her body was found in a shallow grave close to the Leon River in Texas. It was thought that Aaron Robinson, who was a junior soldier, and his girlfriend, Cicely Aguilar, were involved in hiding her body, and they believe that Aaron was the one who bludgeoned her to death with a hammer. His girlfriend, Cicely Aguilar, was an estranged wife of another Fort Hood soldier. It is thought that Aguilar helped Robinson dismember Vanessa's body with a machete and other tools, and that they tried to burn her remains before burying her remains in 3 shallow graves and then pouring concrete over her. The investigation showed that both Robinson and Aguilar's cell phone data showed that they were both at the banks of the Leon River at the same time. Aguilar was charged with 1 count of conspiracy to tamper with evidence. Robinson was seen on the streets of Guillen, Texas, and when he realized that the police were closing in on him, he shot himself at about 1:30 in the morning. Interestingly, from the information that I have gathered, Vanessa reportedly had filed sexual harassment charges against Robinson, which were reportedly ignored. I have a couple of more photos here of Vanessa, and then a couple of photos of Robinson and a photo of Cicely Aguilar. But I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the next case that this is connected to. And that is the murder of Danielle Acosta-Guerrero. Danielle was 38 years old when she was murdered by David Michael Vega, who was a soldier stationed at Fort Hood. He was a member of the 1st Cavalry Division, 4th Brigade Combat Team. On August the 17th, 2012, in Guillen, Texas, a man or a person was jogging down the road when he heard a woman screaming. And he went to the neighbor's house, and they went over to Danielle's house. And they knocked on the door, and Vega came to the door, and he apparently had some blood on his face. He apparently shut the door and then left out the back because they heard some dogs barking, and they found a window open in the back. And this is a photo here of Danielle. But they called the police, and when the police got there, they found that Danielle was still alive, and she was transported to the hospital where she reportedly died there. She also had a 6-year-old son that was home that day. She had other children, but her son was home that day, and apparently Vega had attempted to strangle him and had thrown him up against something, and he was found holding onto his mother's leg, covered in her blood. And they thought at first that the son was deceased, but realized that he was not, and that he was perhaps trying to save his mother. That's a photo here of Mr. Vega. Danielle was reportedly attacked with a machete and received 30 blunt force trauma wounds and 25 stab wounds. Because a neighbor recognized Vega, the police were looking for him, and he was found a few months later in a hotel in California, and he received a life sentence. But apparently he had been harassing Danielle for a while. He had let the air out of her tires, had left notes for her, and apparently, or from what I've been told, Danielle went to or through the chain of command and reported this, all of this, before she was murdered, to Fort Hood, which seemed to be dismissed and ignored, sadly. Some of the information that I gathered about Danielle was from news articles, but I also spoke to a lifelong friend of hers. I would like to thank that friend for this information that she provided. And I'm very sorry that she had to experience this tragic loss. Apparently, Vega was upset because Danielle had broken up with him, and he said that if he couldn't have her, no one else could have her. And that's often said far too often. What you see here is some information that I gathered from militaryjusticeforall.com. In the last 4 years, from January 2016 to present, Fort Hood on average lost 36 soldiers a year. If you divide 36 by 12 months, that's an average of 3 soldiers a month. We must find out why, so we can prevent these untimely deaths and save the precious lives and futures of these mostly young soldiers. The average age at time of death is 28 years old, and each death has a ripple effect on the families, friends, and communities left behind. Military Justice for All asks that we hold leadership accountable and ask that you join them at Military Justice for All on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Here are some statistics that they offered. 140 deaths at Fort Hood since January 2016. 4 insider attacks which occurred in Afghanistan. 2 combat deaths, 1 in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. 5 non-combat deaths, 2 in Afghanistan, 3 in Iraq. 1 overseas death, which was a suicide in Korea. 133 stateside deaths. 1 homicide on post, which was Vanessa Guillen. 3 homicides off post, which are 7 of them are unsolved. 20 deaths ruled suicide. 33 found dead on post. 15 found dead off post. 17 died in training accidents. 10 died in motorcycle accidents, 8 died in automobile accidents, 8 died from medical issues, 5 died in swimming, boating accidents, 1 died in a pretrial confinement at a local jail, 1 declared dead after missing for 2 months, and 1 veteran found dead at Blora in Fort Hood. This comes from Washington, D.C. Veterans presentation on the current status of forces at Fort Hood in December 2017. Now I want to talk about a few things that have come to mind in these 2 cases and reading these other statistics. First of all, there's the machete connection. Machete was used in both cases. One to dismember Vanessa's body, and the other was used to kill Danielle. And I've read about a couple of other cases recently where machetes were used. One was the young man who killed his mother and his twin brothers in Alabama. And there's the Daybell case where they believe a machete was used to dismember bodies. It's just interesting to me that machetes keep being mentioned in these cases, but I suppose they are used because they are so lethal and because people can use them to dismember folks, which is a very disturbing thought. But I'm wondering what's up with all of these cases at Fort Hood. What's going on? Is it an example of violence begetting violence because of all these other cases? It's causing more people to do the same thing. You often have a copycat situation in these type cases. Or maybe there's some kind of violent strategies that they're using that's carrying over into their daily lives. Or is it because some of the cases, some folks received a slap on the wrist or charges were ignored, and it caused some people to think that they can get away with stuff, which I don't see a lot of evidence of that. But what there is obvious evidence of in the 2 cases that I brought up, and why I brought them up, is that they were reported. They were reported to Fort Hood, and they were ignored. And because of that, 2 women died. And when I say that they were reported, I mean the sexual harassment and other types of harassment were reported along the chain of command, and nothing was done about it. And maybe if they were reprimanded, something may have been done about it. Maybe these women would not have died. But Fort Hood cannot continue to ignore allegations of harassment. In closing, I have a quote by General Colin Powell. "Leadership is solving problems. The day soldiers stop bringing you their problems is the day you have stopped leading them. They have either lost confidence that you can help or concluded you do not care. Either case is a failure of leadership."